Difficult Realities is an Elite City Media podcast. If you're interested in more information, make sure you follow us on Twitter at DifficultPod. Subscribe to our official YouTube channel, and keep your eyes open wherever you listen to podcasts for more episodes. No matter what you're listening on, make sure you turn on notifications so you always know when a new episode is posted. And most importantly, remember that while this is an opinion-based podcast, it is also backed up by evidence and facts. Or in other words, this podcast is Difficult Realities. Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the fourth official episode of Difficult Realities. I am Swerve, and I am joined once again, as always, by the two gentlemen on either virtual side of me. To my virtual left, we have Spittin'. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Swerve. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. And to my virtual right, we have the massive Yeti.
How's it going, gents? I'm doing pretty good, so hope you guys are as well.
I'll tell you what's doing particularly well is actually the attention to the podcast lately. Ever since our last episode, I've been putting in some legwork to try to get it distributed, and we have some good results on that front. We are now available in a shit ton of places. We are available, of course, in our original home of YouTube, where our full-length episodes will always be. And pretty soon, I don't want to say when because it's still being legworked, but pretty soon we're going to be doing these shows live in real time on YouTube. So that's exciting. As far as other ways, we are now on a series of platforms, including Podbean and perhaps my favorite, Spotify. As well, I am in the works to get us on iHeartRadio, Pandora, and Apple Podcasts as well. So keep your attention on all of those different locations, and if you didn't know already about Podbean and Spotify, go ahead and drop a follow over there now, ladies and gentlemen. After all, downloads are everything in that world, and who knows, if we get enough of them, we might even be able to become capitalists and start selling you ads, which would just be perfectly thetical, and both antithetical and thetical to what we're doing.
Pretty much, but you know.
So, there's really no way to escape the news, and there's really no way to escape today's podcast. So we're not going to waste too much time with the preamble, but we do need a little bit of lead-in information, if you will, because we have to clear up before we even start. If we want people to avoid the bad faith, and if we want people to avoid the slander and the lack of discretion, then there's things you have to say up front to get that out of the way as early as possible. And why would I be preambling like that? What are we talking about? Well, I think everybody knows what we're talking about. It's Afghanistan, because it is dominating the news cycle on every spectrum, in every group, across every platform. It is the hot news right now. There's no way around it. And specifically because of the disastrous shit show that it's really become. So what preamble is necessary? Well, we're going to talk about a lot of different aspects of this. We're not just going to be talking about it from a militaristic perspective or from a government perspective. There's social perspectives here too. For example, one of the biggest tweets that the podcast had in the last week was my fake feminism tweet about white women particularly, pretending to care about women in Afghanistan when they can't be bothered to care about women in Flint, Michigan. And so we want to just clear up a couple things before we get started. First and foremost, I would assume that all three of us are pretty much generally opposed to war for any good reason.
Yeah.
Sir.
So we're obviously not warmongers. We're not going to be towing the line of the military-industrial complex. We're going to be getting into things like Lockheed Martin and Halliburton and other companies and former administrations that profited from these wars. You know, we're also not going to pull punches when it comes to things like Julian Assange and military leaks and whistleblowers and truths that have come out about the war in Afghanistan since its inception. So we want to make that clear, but we also need to talk about this. Look, we recognize that this situation is incredibly complex and we are not experts. We're not military experts, we're not social experts, we're not foreign experts, we're not even, I mean, hell, we're not even natives of the country that we're talking about. So we're literally outsiders in this context to a great degree, and we don't depreciate that fact. We understand what that means. But at the same time, I think because even at this tiny little platform that we're building and trying to turn into something more substantial, we have a responsibility to be honest. And if we're going to participate in the threads, then we need to do so with integrity. So we tried very hard tonight to find credible, legitimate sources for our information. We're trying to source everything that we can from a good place that's not, you know, rooted in deep-seated military industrial propaganda and loaded with, you know, pro-war information. But we also didn't just go searching for information that confirmed our biases. Like, we've never done that once in the 4-episode history of the show, and we're not going to do it in the future. I'm not interested in being reaffirmed of what I already think. I'm interested in developing a conversation around truth, and that's always been my mindset with this, and it will always be my mindset with this, is creating a conversation about truth. So with all of that being said, if you're listening to this from any perspective, okay, if you're a liberal or if you're a conservative or a leftist or an independent or a libertarian or whatever you are, you need to keep in mind that our political opinions on this are rooted deeply in the information we were able to dig up. And we're only going to be talking from a perspective of honesty to the best of our goodwill intentions, and from a perspective of human decency and humanism, because that's really the core here. The war and all of that is one thing, but there's a big humanitarian aspect to this that we're not going to ignore either. And so I've said a lot here, and the point of it was just to remind everybody that, yes, this is an opinion-based show, but it is rooted in having discussions around truth. And I try as hard as possible to make sure that mine, and I'm sure Yeti and Spittin do as well, to make sure that our opinions are rooted in good faith information. So I want to throw that out at the beginning, because we're going to spend the next 50-some minutes talking about this in a way that will make people uncomfortable no matter what side you're on. And I hate to even, like, attribute it to a sidal discussion, because it really shouldn't be. But you're going to hear things no matter where you lie in the spectrum that are going to make your eyes pop open. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to my co-hosts now, because I want to give them each a chance to give their thoughts to this before we really dive into this discussion, because once we go in, there's no coming back. So we'll start with Spittin'. And Spittin', I know you have been preparing a shit ton for this episode. In fact, we had another episode planned that you were preparing for, and you actually suggested we shelve that one to talk about this, and I completely agreed with you. So what have you looked into, and what are your thoughts in this whole situation that's unfolding before our eyes?
Well, all right. The first thing that I want to get out there is, you know, I'm a conspiratorial person at heart. You know, I mean, I could go for days about all the shit that got us to where we are today. You know, about staged buildings blowing up and shit like that. But that's not what we're going to do today. You know, I could go probably for hours just talking about all the stuff that I think. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all the stuff that I know, you know, like that we have done our research on this, and at least on my end, man, everything that I'm going to say today is factual and can be, you know, just found with a simple Google search or YouTube search. And yeah, I just want, because I wanted to put that out there, because you know, if you follow me on Twitter and shit, like yeah, I can go really far in the conspiracies. And it more often than not anymore, it seems like that shit's being proven to come true. Now, on this end, it's a lot of the stuff I'm going to say, it's going to sound like that. If you are not well versed in what's been going on the last 20 years or so, you're going to be like, man, this is too far out there. But it's not. It's all right there, at your disposal. And if all this stuff that I'm getting ready to talk about, that we're getting ready to talk about, is true, and can be found just that easy, think about the shit that we don't know,
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, I'll go ahead and, I want to open with this retired 4-star general, Wesley Clark.
Okay.
Now, I've asked you guys if you're familiar with him, and you're not particularly familiar
No.
with this.
The name obviously rings a bell just from, the things that have been unfolding, but the specifics, I could give you nothing of merit.
Oh, okay. So this guy, he was the head of the NATO commanders in chief, or whatever it was, for the war in Afghanistan. Okay. He's a retired 4-star general. Like I said, he's got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He was a former presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, I think, in 2008. And okay, so in 2007, he was interviewed by a woman named Amy Goodman, who is the host of a show called Democracy Now!
Yeah, I'm familiar with Democracy Now!
Okay. So this is now this video, like I said, you can search it, Wesley Clark, Amy Goodman, and it'll pop up on YouTube. Okay, but here's he starts talking. He says, about 10 days after 9/11, I went to the Pentagon and I saw Rumsfeld and I saw Wolfowitz. I went downstairs to see some of the people that used to work for me. One of the generals called me in and he said, we've made the decision to go to war with Iraq. I said, why? He said, I don't know. I guess they don't know what else to do. I said, well, did they find something connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no, there's nothing new on that end. We just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem has to look like a nail. So that was the first part.
May
I go ahead?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a little bit like the John Ehrlichman quote that I referenced a couple episodes ago regarding the drug situation, where he said, that knowingly lying about the drugs allowed them to target political enemies and whatnot. And if you haven't listened to that, it's episode 2, by the way, if you're interested in that topic. But yeah, I mean, this government in this country for a long time now has profited off of war, and we're going to get more into that in depth. And so, I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all that people in power would look for the proverbial nail, so to speak, to hit with their, $1 trillion hammer.
Yeah. So the first time I heard that, I was just, floored. And like I said, that was way back in 2007. And, I was still pretty deep in the Democrat Kool-Aid back then. And
right. I think a lot of us were.
Yeah. In this moment, when this was happening, it kind of was one of the things that opened my eyes a little bit. Now, so he goes on, and he says, so I went back to see him a few weeks later. And by that time, we had started bombing Afghanistan. I said, hey, are we still going to war with Iraq? He said, oh, it's worse than that. He picked up a piece of paper and he said, this just came down from upstairs, meaning Rumsfeld's office. He said, this memo describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off with Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me then. I saw him a year or so ago after that. And I said, hey, do you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show you that. He goes on to say, my point on this is not that Iranians are the good guys, because they're not, but that you shouldn't use force except as a last resort. There is a military option, but it's a bad one. And, you know, that's about the most honest you're ever going to hear a general that was still, you know, he was retired at the time, but he was talking about something that he was a part of.
Yeah.
And he, you know, he shared that at the time because he still loved his country, but he wasn't proud of where we had gotten to. And when I named those countries, those 7 in 5 years, we have, I mean, we didn't do it all in 5 years' time, but we have checked off every one of those countries except Iran.
Well, and Somalia looks like it's going to be coming up next.
And we almost did.
I mean, but we already have. You know, I mean, we've already done Somalia.
We almost did check off Iran at the beginning of the year too.
Oh yeah, and we will. You know,
the beginning of 2020, I should say.
And I mean, well, in this year too.
Well, it's crazy to think also that my time has blended that much together since COVID started.
Yeah,
I don't know what day it is ever.
In fact, you thought it was Wednesday when I mentioned taping the podcast yesterday.
Oh, I was like, when are we gonna? I was like, God damn, when are we gonna do a podcast?
Guys, we're running late. It's already Monday.
I'm like, these stories ain't stopping, guys. And then you're like, well, I planned on doing it the same time we did it last week, and I'm just like, well, it's already fucking. Oh, yeah, it's only Monday.
A reminder in my phone because I know I'll forget.
Yes. So I guess what I think hearing that, you know, and I have to wonder, it sounds like if I'm going to take the general at his word, right, which I'm going to do for the sake of argument, if for no other reason, if I'm going to take the general at his word, it sounds like he's thinking in good faith that the military occupation of Afghanistan and then by proxy all of these other countries would have been for some legitimate military purpose, that it would have been for some sort of stabilization of the region or, you know, strong foot against much larger opponent or removal of political regime that is terrifying to either citizens, foreign or domestic. Like it seems to be in good faith if I take him at his word, right?
Well, and it really is, you know, if he's done a lot of good work since then, and it's kind of like the whole rushing into and I know that we were already in Afghanistan and this has more to do with the other countries, but it's relative because he this is when his eyes got open as well. You know, it wasn't just casual Americans. This was a 4-star general that immediately, once he got into Afghanistan, he realized that something wasn't right. And then a couple weeks later, he's getting called into another general's office who's sharing just this crazy timeline of taking over 5 countries in 7 years. Like he said, we've got a good military and we can topple governments and we don't know what to do about terrorists, but you know, if every problem you have looks like a nail, we're the
Yeah.
hammer.
Yeah.
You know, that's I think that's why I wanted to start with it, because I think it is relative to why we've been in Afghanistan for so freaking long, why we've been in Iraq for so freaking long, why we have 850 military bases across the globe.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think it's a portion, but I just, my brain hitches on the good faith that it was entirely a military-based stratagem when it, in the context of, you know, that it was entirely rooted in some sort of legitimate government-based progression towards eliminating a threat. And the reason that my brain hitches on that, I have to wonder if this guy's a general and this guy's privy to classified information and has all this other, you know, all these different sources of good, you know, intelligence, you know, quote unquote, coming to him, that there's things that he wouldn't know about, right? And for example, this is a little bit after the fact of what you're talking about, because you're talking about the interview from March 2nd of 2007, right?
Yes, but
yeah,
he's talking about getting this information 10 days or so
right
after we started bombing Afghanistan.
Right, and I understand that. I'm just making sure that I'm referencing the right interview, because I found it as soon as I typed it in. I found it, and so this information comes after the fact, but I think it's relevant because in order for this information to come to light, it would have had to have been taking place in the same time frame. So, but you guys know that by 2014, Afghanistan was tripling its opium production as opposed to 2000.
Yes.
And by 2015, Afghanistan was a source of 90% of the world's opium poppy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I read that last night.
Now we've also shared articles on our Twitter and on between ourselves as well about how there are mineral deposits under Afghanistan that were found around 2010. In fact, you had a whole bunch of interaction around this particular topic. I'm skeptical anytime the United States government goes into a country that is resource dependent. And the reason for that is because in the 70s, there was I don't know if I want to call it a bill or if I want to call it what I want to call it, but essentially it was a document that was passed through from the United States military, that was passed through the government, and it was titled Oil Fields as Military Objectives, a Feasibility Study. And for the record, this information has been declassified, and you can actually buy copies of this report. On Amazon, as a matter of fact, you can actually buy copies of this report. And it goes into great detail about military strategies to acquire resources from other places, and to do so skirting the law or disguising the law so that it appears more favorable to the cause. And we know for a fact that a lot of the other countries that were mentioned in that memo given to Wesley, what was his name? Wesley
Clark.
Wesley Clark, that a lot of those other countries were resource dependent countries too. Their primary income was some form of export. So I just hesitate on this good faith idea that I've never, even from the time that I was like a baby in politics, right? Because you think about it, 9/11 was almost exactly 20 years ago. We're closing up on the 20th anniversary of that real quick. Since then, even 2003, I remember sitting in 5th grade watching Afghanistan get bombed on television, right? Watching Iraq get bombed on television. And since then, I've always been skeptical about this because, not to dig into Iraq too much, but we know for a fact that they lied about their intentions to get into Iraq. We know it for a fact. There was no weapons of mass destruction. There was no yellow cake uranium. The intelligence department did not have good information that Al-Qaeda had assisted, or that Saddam Hussein had assisted with the 9/11 attacks. Everything they said from the time they started talking, going all the way through Donald Rumsfeld and Colin Powell and all of the others, they knew they were lying and they did it anyway. So, I mean, do you get where I'm coming from? Why it just strikes me as bad faith when the United States, the military and the Congress and everybody involved in wartime efforts has just lied so easily and so frequently.
Oh, yeah,
I just assume anytime the government says something about war, then it's probably most likely the opposite of what's happening.
Yeah.
So
And don't get me wrong here. Like this dude, I mean, he had a ulterior motive to disclose this information. Like I said, this was 2007, and he was planning a presidential run in 2008 as a Democrat. So he's painting a bad light on Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld at the time. So it's always political, and also, we can't ignore the fact that all these countries that he listed are all enemies of Saudi Arabia and Israel.
yeah,
Two of our main
strongholds in the
allies.
region, if you will.
And it would behoove them to see these people crippled, and
well, the U.S. is constantly putting up military bases all over around
permanent
people.
military bases.
Like I said,
because they're trying to
we've got
surround
800
China right now.
We've got 850 that we know of.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous.
yeah.
I think maybe Russia has 2.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about all the time our bloated military budget. It's one of the most common discussions among leftists in terms of how do we pay for anything. I think it's a bit of a farce when people. Well, let me put it to you this way. The reason they'll never cut our military budget is because cutting it by even 1% would reduce the number of permanent military stations they could position around the world to create a stronghold everywhere they can. Like, it's not about the experimental planes or the weapons testings or the sales that's all the surface level stuff. The underneath stuff, the real place that a lot of this money goes is to these bases, these stations, the people in other countries that they pay for information, the locations that they position themselves to obtain. Like, there is no more valuable commodity in the world than information, right? Everybody, to some extent, will pay for information. And we're no different. The United States government is no different. If you're kidding yourself if you think it's never negotiated for a terrorist, for a hostage. You're kidding yourself if you think it's never paid for, for fuck's sake, Project Paperclip is like public knowledge.
Well,
right?
They say they don't negotiate with terrorists, but they also just said they were negotiating with the Taliban, who they claim are terrorists.
Negotiating with terrorism is a farce because we know Reagan did it. Reagan's administration negotiated with terrorists at the time.
Oh, of course.
We know it. And speaking of, I do want to get into the actual details of the Taliban, but before I do, I want to make sure that Yeti has completed his point on Wesley Clark. Sorry. So if you have any, did you have any more information on that, General, for us?
Not on Wesley Clark, no.
Yeah,
I have some other.
That was just that was just going to be my lead in.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it is very. I don't think there's any doubt that the United States military just fucking loves to flex on hoes, right? Like, we know that's the stratagem. They love, and fucking conservatives love that shit. They eat that shit up, right? Like, all you got to do is put a support our troops sticker on anything, and conservatives I could probably put a support our troops sticker on Cirque du Soleil and get conservatives to turn out en masse.
Well,
flag even.
All the I'll say conservatives, but also these conservative liberals on media that are all just, oh my God, the women and children. Think of the women and children. I just read you how these people, these psychos, how they think of countries. It's a game of risk. It's not. This isn't life and death to them. They don't give shit how many millions of people they've killed.
Right.
So every time I hear, one of these conservative pundits come on TV and fake cry about the poor women and children, like Nancy Pelosi, for instance, she put out the her little tweet about the women and children and
Yeah.
of Afghanistan, and I responded back to her, in your district, you allow boulders to be placed on your sidewalk, spikes to be placed underneath your bridges, spring to make women and children of San Francisco, houseless women and children, as uncomfortable as humanly possible. You also turn sprinklers on homeless vets, and you also just okayed $20,000 trash cans to
Yeah.
deter quote garbage scavengers.
Yes,
end
I
quote.
saw that bullshit.
Those are Americans that
I
she's
know.
talking about, and you want me to believe that your $191 million ass gives one shit about some poor person over in Afghanistan?
Yeah,
Give me a break.
Can we talk for a little bit about some of these bad faith arguments? Because this is one of the big things I wanted to get into is the propaganda aspect of this whole war. From the start to today, we've been propagandized from the beginning about this entire thing. And I wanted to get into some of these bad faith arguments because they have literally taken over the minds of some people when it comes to this war, right?
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, think about this, okay? Do you think about the vast amount of money that has been spent on this war? The people that have died, it's what, something like 3,800 soldiers, right? And that's just Americans.
Yeah.
And then a couple 100,000 civilians. I think it was like 400,000 civilians. Don't quote me on the number. I don't have it in front of me.
But just in Afghanistan or between Afghanistan?
Just Afghanistan.
Yes. That's a pretty accurate estimate, I think.
Right. So, I mean, you think right there, let's just round it up and say 450,000 people. Okay. Let's just be generous with the number. So we spent some $1 trillion for the last 20 years. It was approximately $360 million a month in foreign war and foreign aid. So they claim it's foreign aid, but who the fuck knows who it's actually helping, right?
Yeah.
$360 million a month,
rich
give or
people
take.
in other countries.
Largely. $360 million a month in supposed foreign aid. Okay. For what? Like, what's the return on investment from this? We spent 20 years.
You want
there.
the real return on investment?
No, we'll get to that. Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about that a little bit. We'll get to that, but I'm more so making a rhetorical point. So think about it like this. We spent 20 years from the time that I was in basically second or third grade to today. Okay, we've been in Afghanistan and other countries, but Afghanistan. Okay, we were told from the time this whole thing started, if we did not get in there and issue a military presence, that the Taliban would take over that country and force people into Sharia law and force people into, segregation and oppression, and that women would be denied access to schools, and that women would be denied access to careers, and that women would be denied this and that, and that the oppressive Islamic religion would destroy cultures and societies. We pull out, and the day after we pull out, the Taliban takes over. So what the fuck were you doing for 20 years, right? I have never once believed that the United States government had any meaningful, legitimate interest in actually removing the Taliban from power. After all, actions from previous administration directly led to their creation.
Yep.
Yeah.
We can't pretend that didn't happen. And if you don't believe me, I want you to look up things like Ronald Reagan and the Contra fighters and the destabilizations. Or you could look at an even more recent example of us doing the same thing when the Bush administration and their actions directly led to the creation of ISIS.
Hillary Clinton, Jimmy Dore played a clip of Hillary Clinton just straight up saying, it was a congressional hearing, she straight up said that we created the Taliban in order to bankrupt Russia.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the original theory on what people in the conspiracy theory kind of realm, the original idea behind the Iraq invasion was Bush was just finishing his dad's
I heard
war
that
for him.
I heard that a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But here's my
makes sense.
Yeah, here's my larger point though behind all of this. It's always practical for the United States to have a boogeyman, whether that's foreign or domestic. We always have to have somebody to point a finger at.
It's Chomsky's fifth filter.
Yeah,
and manufacturing consent.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to have that. And so let's take a look at some of these arguments that people have made, and especially more recently about why we have to, because there's calls to stay now that all of this has taken place. We took out, 2,000 troops and put 6,000 more back in? Is that an accurate figure?
Yeah,
it's 5,000.
That's what it sounds
5,000?
like,
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, give or take. But so there's people now, we have to stay. And all of a sudden, all these war hawks like Bill Kristol or Paul Wolfowitz are out here saying things like, this was mishandled from the get-go. This was not how we should have handled the exit. And I've watched Bill Kristol get on television for years and lie to my face. Like, just years. Bill Kristol got on, when it came to Afghanistan or Iraq, there's weapons of WMDs over there. There's retaliation for 9/11. There's Al-Qaeda and Taliban forces and other organization forces are all spread out through here. They're all working together. Bill Kristol got on television and absolutely stoked every fire he could get his hands on. Sorry about that. He stoked every fire he could get his hands on to make this war look more appealing to the average citizen. And just a few days ago, on the 12th of August, he's tweeting out that we could have kept 3,500 troops in Afghanistan and kept a status quo. First of all, what the fuck is the Afghan status quo if the second we leave, the Taliban is able to retake the whole country? But furthermore, the Biden administration chose to withdraw. We're seeing humanitarian catastrophe and geopolitical disaster unfold. Now, humiliatingly, we have to send 3,000 troops in to get the remaining Americans out. Bill Kristol led this charge, and all of a sudden, he wants to talk about humanitarianism. Bill Kristol didn't give an absolute shit about humanitarianism when he was profiting off this idea that yellow cake uranium was in Iraq. And you're not going to convince me for 1 second, that all of a sudden he cares about women's education in Afghanistan, women's right to vote in Afghanistan, due process, electoral politics, all of these things that these sort of big names on television say they care about. You're not going to convince me for 1 second that he suddenly cares about that kind of stuff. And we even have leftists like Marianne Williamson, who you actually spit and responded to yourself, agreeing with him.
Yeah. Yeah,
because this fucking, one of the biggest things I've been fighting about, and I don't mean to keep cutting you off, I'm going to let you go here, but one of the biggest things that I've been complaining about is all of a sudden, all of these liberal white women are crawling out of the woodwork to tell us about how important it is that women in Afghanistan have their education defended and that women have the right to go to school in Afghanistan. And I'm sitting here watching you guys pour out of the woodwork, say all this shit, when 2 weeks ago, you didn't give a shit about women in Afghanistan. You couldn't even be bothered to pretend about women in Flint, Michigan. And you're going to come in here and pretend all of a sudden that you care about women in Afghanistan. I don't believe white feminists when they say they care about Afghanistan 1 inch, because I have never seen good faith come from that. It's always about these minuscule American-based problems. And they weaponize women. There was a damn, in 2000, let me find it real quick because it's relevant. It's right here on our Twitter feed. So back in the 2000s, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, a Democrat from New York, went on television with a burqa to justify the invasion in Afghanistan as some championing of women. It's never been about that. And for you guys to crawl out of the woodwork and start to use that, to weaponize that as an excuse for warmongering, is literally using women as a political token. And it's fucking vile. It's vile to weaponize women like that and to turn them into this political machine that you can draw sympathy for. Nobody up here is pro-Taliban limiting women's rights. Nobody up here is pro-Taliban taking women out of school. But for fuck's sake, you don't give a shit. You give a shit about caring like you look like you give a shit. That's what you care about. It's so much about appearances, and it bothers me so much because it might not seem like it, but these are fucking human beings over there that are going to experience the consequences of this, and that fucking matters to me. To some extent, to some level, it fucking matters to me that human beings over there, even if I can't touch them or experience them or interact with them in any physical, meaningful way other than, social media or what have you, it matters to me that there's human fucking beings over there that are going to experience the fallout, and you're going to fucking weaponize them. It's fucking disgusting.
It happens every time, and it's been going on for years and years. And it's absolutely appalling, like you said, right? Like there's no justification for only caring about someone's rights when it's convenient.
They're just
like, and that's why I always say we need to treat people like humans. Treat other people like they're humans. Oh yeah, that
people in
representative is still in the Senate too. Yeah, I
Really?
looked her up yesterday.
What do you know?
I couldn't believe it. She's like 80 years old.
Holy
Still
fuck.
taking up
Of
space.
course.
Remind me to do an episode on age limits in politics at some point.
These people.
They're 25. That's the age limit.
These people in power, they aren't like us. They're as close to just Satan as you'll ever get, and whether it be us or the people in Afghanistan, we're all just pawns in their game of chess. And so anytime that I stumble on a Marianne Williamson or Nancy Pelosi telling me think about the children and the women, yes, I care about that kind of shit because I'm broke, and those people are just like me, just scraping to get by, trying to figure out what life's about. But anytime that they say shit like that, all I can just hit them back with is, what about Saudi Arabia? The only difference between Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan is Saudi Arabia is rich and they have oil. Yeah. Afghanistan doesn't, and they're poor. So
I think Saudi Arabia
that's
is
why all of a sudden they care about Afghanistan, women and children, but they'll never mention how in Saudi Arabia it's the same exact. They live by the same exact rules.
Or what about Saudi Arabia might actually be more strict.
It might be.
To be honest.
Yeah. And what about, even stepping out of the Middle East, because I think even just the conversation about the Middle East is somewhat of a farce. Look at something like South Africa, where those people are still affected by the apartheid state that took place over there. Look at, places all over Africa where women are subjected to much harsher treatment.
Yeah, I mean, Uganda is a really bad one too.
Yeah, but my point being that, and Mike Spitton said, this isn't actually about feminism. None of these, and it's not about any of these other bullshit excuses that the U.S. military-industrial complex gives us either. It's war hawking, and it's weaponizing social movements in order to justify war hawking, because if the people are on your side, it's easier to lie to them. Bold-faced stop.
Yep, it's back to that simple kind of propaganda recipe. Find an enemy, just yell about them as much as you can, till eventually people are like, oh, they must be right if they yell about it this much.
We actually ran
You're right, especially with the way that liberal media and conservative media, if you've been watching the last 2 days, have coalesced around this topic. Like, this is the first time Biden has been in office for 8 months, 7 months, whatever. And the guy declared victory against COVID, and nobody said anything. The kids are not only still in cages, but now they are so full that they're keeping people under bridges in Odessa, Texas. But the liberal media hasn't said one cross word about him this whole time. All it takes is for him to pull the plug on a Raytheon pet project, and all of a sudden, liberal media and conservative media have, they've joined hands singing Kumbaya, fucking, what has Biden done? And it's like, please don't make me defend that son of a bitch.
And it's worse because there's young kids now that are dying.
Yeah.
There's young kids that are getting the same kind of virus I got when I was 13 that caused me to have a heart transplant. And I wouldn't wish that shit on anyone. That was fucking rough.
So we actually ran a poll on our Twitter account in regards to the war hawking of social aspects. And the poll read, do you believe the media's use of Afghan women suffering as a reason to stay in Afghanistan is in good faith? Had over 100 votes. 92.6% of our votes said no. So I think a good portion of our audience, at the very least, agrees and understands where we are coming from. Because, again, I hate that just like last week we had to talk about all the pedophile stuff and say, like, nobody up here is pro-pedophile. Nobody up here is anti-feminist. Nobody up here is, like, anti-women empowerment. Nobody up here is anti-equality. Like, that should be, I shouldn't even have to specify that. What we're
that's
opposing,
pretty general.
Yeah, what we're opposing is the use of these movements and the weaponization of these movements to rile people up to justify war. Like, it's in complete bad faith, and it's a hypocrisy that is, it's such a loud and brazen hypocrisy that it's almost insulting to my intelligence that someone would even try to justify something like that, to using that weapon of propaganda. But
they'll use anything they can.
You guys touched on something interesting when you brought up Biden, because I do want to talk about President Biden a little bit. And it's interesting because it's sort of like what you guys were saying about how all of a sudden the party system is united on this issue. Like the news parties, Fox and CNN and MSNBC are all united on this issue. Because it was Nicole Wallace who sent out last night this idea that 95% of the population would agree with everything Biden said in his speech. And today, Biden sent out a couple tweets that had people who I know are pretty strong leftists defending him. So I want to read these tweets to you guys, and I want to get into this a little bit because I want to see if if you guys think Biden has a point here, or if you think Biden's fudging it, right? So he sent out two tweets, and they read as followed. I have authorized 6,000 U.S. troops to deploy to Afghanistan to assist in the departure of U.S. and allied civilian personnel from Afghanistan and to evacuate our Afghan allies and vulnerable Afghans to safety outside the country. Our current military mission will be short in time and focused in its objectives. Get our people and our allies to safety as quickly as possible, and once we have completed this mission, we will conclude our military withdrawal. We will end America's longest war. And he also tweeted out last night, today the terrorist threat has metastasized. I can't read all of a sudden, so let me start that again. Today the terrorist threat has metastasized beyond Afghanistan. We conduct effective counterterrorism missions against terrorist groups in multiple countries where we don't have permanent military presence. Bullshit. If necessary, we will do the same in Afghanistan.
Yep. That's what he said in that speech yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe him at all. Because he also brought up China and Russia. Then he brought up how human rights is an issue they care about. And then he turned around and threatened violence.
But furthermore, when it comes to that speech, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys did because I retweeted this onto our Twitter, but the official link that the White House sent out blocked the chat and censored the comments.
Oh, that's always.
I know, but why would you need to do that if you're not trying to steer the discussion?
Did you see the dislikes?
Yeah, it was like 2,000 something.
It was like, last I checked, it was like 3,000 dislikes to like maybe 800 likes.
Well, and then at the end of it, he just quit and walked away. Like he just bailed. It was like, not even taking anything. I'm just out, leaving.
So people are
because he knows that every one of those questions, usually when he takes questions, if you notice, he's always got a list, and he'll look down and he'll be like, Cliff from the Washington Post, and
he doesn't know his name though.
he knows, like, all these people have already submitted their questions. Yep. Like
he knows he's got the softies.
If he's not taking questions, then that means nobody was throwing any softballs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So people are all
over. Tried to. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say people all over are giving Biden a ton of credit because he's supposedly refusing to pass the buck on to other people. To which I say bullshit. I guarantee that by the time this whole story settles and the dust is, more colorful somewhere else, that we will still have a strong military presence in Iraq, that we will still have permanent military bases in Iraq, Afghanistan, that we will still be constantly involved in the goings of Afghanistan. We will hear about it from war hawks like Bill Kristol and Paul Wolfowitz. And if John McCain were alive, oh fuck, would he be trumpeting at every single tweet that came his way. So I'm just not buying it. I'm not buying that this is over. I'm not buying it for a second.
I think it is, but not for the reasons that they're going to tell you it is. I think that I don't think this is a withdrawal. I think this I don't think it's I think it's a forced withdrawal.
Oh yeah, they're running.
Because what did Jimmy Dore say last night? Okay, during Biden's speech, he was like, if we can't get these troops in Afghanistan that we trained to take up arms in their civil war, then we might as well just leave. What are we doing? Well, and it's like Jimmy Dore said, if they aren't taking up arms against the Taliban, then it's not a civil war.
Well, not only that, did you see some of the interesting information that came out where they actually polled a lot of the Afghan citizens about how they felt and what they sort of wanted for their country? Have you seen some of that?
No,
I haven't seen any of it.
I'm going to have to go and find it again. But amongst that information, and I will pull it up here after I finish talking just so we can discuss it in accuracy, but I think something like well over 90% of the population, and this is like regular people, wanted some form of Sharia law, wanted some form of Islamic domination. And an overwhelming majority of them also wanted like mandated state religion and mandated religious laws. So it's an interesting thing to realize that the Taliban, and this is in no way an endorsement of them, but the Taliban and what the people wanted for themselves may not be all that far off in terms of ideals. It may just be the execution that might be the issue over there.
Yeah, and I think that by the Taliban being able to take over the whole country in a matter of days without firing a single bullet speaks volumes about the data that you're suggesting. That holy shit, I can't believe it. America wore out its welcome somewhere it was never wanted to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and if that's how they want to live, then who the fuck are we to tell them they're wrong about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, we can have like a moral objection. Like,
yeah, of course.
Universally, I have a moral objection to religion being a dominating force in any government, but I understand that I may not have a right to make that decision for other people.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of organized religion or having any kind of effect on the rules in which we live.
That's just a different world over there, though.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And it's a different culture that we might not necessarily have a place in.
Yeah, and if that, like I said, like if that's how they wish to live in their society, then that's perfectly acceptable to me. Because that's what they choose.
Can we go back in time a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead. I need some time to search for this information anyway.
So on September 14th, 3 days after 9/11 in 2001, I mean, this all moved so fast. Like, I forgot how fast it moved. Like, I remember watching the towers, and I'm not sure if one had dropped yet or if they were both still standing, but I remember Tom Brokaw saying, this is war, without even knowing the details yet. Like they were already ready for this. And like I said, I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theorist side of it, but okay, September 14th, the House voted on the authorization for use of military force bill. 420 yeas to 1 nay and 10 abstained in the House, and 98 yeas in the Senate, and 2 abstained from voting. So there were no nays in the Senate. The only one nay was a Democrat from California, Barbara Lee. And now, like, I'm seeing on Twitter, like, her getting her due finally for this. Like, people are bringing up old video of her voting against it. And at the time, she criticized the invasion, calling it a blank check, giving the government unlimited powers to wage war without debate. Huh? How
Right.
Jesus Christ.
Right.
So then let's fast forward a month, okay, to October 14th of 2001. Now this was a Guardian article back then, and the headline read, "Bush rejects Taliban offer to hand bin Laden over." Did you know about this?
Yeah, I actually did know. They do you mind if I elaborate a little bit, or am I
Yes,
spoiling
please.
your information?
No, please.
So, as far as I understood it, the United States government under Bush had actually reached out and negotiated with the Taliban for the exchange of Osama bin Laden if the United States government could prove that Osama bin Laden and his cohorts had some level of responsibility with 9/11 terrorist attacks, and or had some level of involvability with some planned future attack.
Perfect. Exactly.
Wow.
Cool.
All they were willing to turn him over. Now, whether they would have remains
That's
to
another
be
story,
seen,
yeah.
okay, but all they wanted was proof. And let's see.
They
here, I
should
got
have
the
just used that
Wouldn't you
passport
at
that
least
fell out of the sky.
Wouldn't you at least like, what do you have to lose from that exchange, right?
Well, because they're
Like, if you're operating in good faith, let me just be clear. If you're operating in good faith and your general goal in all of this is to arrest Osama bin Laden and disrupt the Taliban, or disrupt, your main opposition from the 9/11 attacks, what do you have to lose from having your enemy turn their leader over to you? Wouldn't you not open up a new door of negotiation?
yeah. So Bush said the bombing would not stop unless the Taliban turned bin Laden over, along with his cohorts and any hostages that they had. There
Right.
was no need for us to provide any proof because we already know that he's guilty.
Right.
And then they offered again to hand him over to a third country, because that's generally how you do shit like this.
Yeah.
So they wanted to offer to turn him over to a third country later on, just to stop the bombing, and he rejected that too. And where's the
Well, while you're looking for your bit of information there, I did find what I was looking for.
Oh, okay.
In regards to that information that I brought up. So the source on this is Pew Research. Pretty good, obviously pretty good source on there. This was a survey conducted in non-Taliban times in Iraq. They actually talked to several Southern, Eastern European, Central Asian, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan African countries as well. And the results of this in regards to Afghanistan, and I will post the source for this, 99% of the country say they want Sharia law. 96% of the country say converting others to Islam is a duty. 94% say the wife is always obliged to obey the husband. 85% say stoning is a must for adultery. 79% say death must be for apostasy. And 39% say suicide bombing is sometimes justified. Now, look, we can make a case morally against all of that. I would argue that we could make a case against every one of those things as a moral argument. But do we have a right to go and tell these people by force that you're wrong? That's the big point that we were bringing up with all of that. Because I don't think anybody, let's just be clear once again for the critics, none of us support Sharia law. It's gross and disgusting and oppressive. None of us say that we should convert other people to Islam. I'm a Satanist, for fuck's sake. I don't believe Islam for a second. I don't think any of us believe a wife is always obliged to obey a husband. There's some shitty fucking men out there, and women have every right to independence. You know, we don't stone people for cheating. We don't kill people for apostasy, and we definitely don't suicide bomb, right? But our point is just that if the country wants this for itself, do we have a right to dictate that it's wrong?
No.
And they stone people in Saudi Arabia again.
Yes.
You know, like they live by the same law, or like Yeti said, if not worse than in Afghanistan. It's just a matter of, you know, they have oil, and like Trump said, pay in cash.
Yeah. Well, I think that might be why a lot of people that came back from war suffered a lot of PTSD, is because they saw stuff that they didn't think was right.
I think stress of wartime definitely breaks people.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and especially after
Pat Tillman.
WikiLeaks released the videos. You know,
Yeah. Well, you
Just
you guys know about
dropping
Pat
bombs.
Tillman too, right?
Pat Tillman. The football player.
Yeah, the football
Yeah.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
a staunch to atheist, Pat Tillman.
Yeah. Well, there was some more research done in 2003 that 2007, released 2,300-page testimonies with accounts from doctors that say the injuries sustained did not match the scenario described.
Mm-hmm.
So Tillman had 3 bullet holes in his forehead that were from an M16, and the original report that said it was shot from 50 yards away that would have been enemy fire. Whereas this report states it was probably more likely 10 yards.
Jesus.
I've also heard a lot about the way that conservatives romanticize Pat Tillman leaving the NFL to sign up for war because he felt it was his patriotic duty. Is not at all the story of Pat Tillman.
Well, I wonder that, because even like you look back at Pat Tillman's history, he seemed like a genuinely good person for most.
Yeah.
From what I can read, his brother was also there too. I think Kevin Tillman. So because he went there because he did turn down a few $1 million contract too, as well.
He had just signed it, hadn't he? And so by him leaving,
he had either just signed it or rejected it.
Made it null and void, right? Because he, because I think he had just signed like a $2.5 million contract, and then he had to give it all back, the signing bonus or whatever.
Okay.
Something to that effect, yeah.
I think so. I mean, that was a long time ago, you know.
Yeah, because he joined in 2002 with his brother, and they trained at Fort Lewis. He did a tour in Iraq in 2003, and then 2004 he did the Afghan tour where he was killed. And then he was, because they were patrolling rugged terrain in eastern Afghanistan at the time.
God damn, that happened quick, you know?
Yeah. Like, I think, like, almost as soon as he was brought in there. And he was with the Rangers, too. The 75th Regiment.
All right, so here's what I've got.
Pretty elite.
This is from The Guardian. Pat Tillman was an atheist, as I said, a liberal and a thinker. He also had an insatiable appetite for knowledge and a good nose for the truth. He quickly realized that the invasion of Iraq was a criminal act based on lies. Quote, "This war is so fucking illegal," he told a friend in 2003. Way too decent and smart to be the poster boy for war, Tillman became an increasingly vocal critic of it and had arranged to meet with anti-war intellectual Noam Chomsky after his tour of Afghanistan in 2004. He never made it to that meeting because obviously he died.
Oh,
yeah, I kind of brought up a bit of that earlier because it seemed like he got the idea that these wars weren't on the up and up, and he might have started saying things.
Right.
Right? And so...
And to have a celebrity that people would know, you know, because obviously as an NFL player, people would know who Pat Tillman was. It would be like the equivalent today would be like if Khalil Mack dropped out of the NFL to just go fight in Iraq or something, and then when he got over there was like, "Yo, this shit's whack, fellas."
Yeah,
Oh,
he just made a Pro Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the other thing they noticed from one of the investigations after, there was actually no evidence of any enemy fire at the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't getting shot at when he got killed.
Well, and when I remember hearing that it ended up they covered it up and it ended up being friendly fire, but I never heard that he got shot point blank from in the head.
Yeah,
I'd never heard that either.
3 bullet holes directly in his forehead.
Yeah, I'd never heard that either.
You got to be pretty close to get that accurate of a shot.
Can you dig up a source on that, sir?
Yeah, it was from Runners.
See if you can find it and send it to me, and I'll include it with the other ones for this episode.
Yeah, I'll grab it off my phone.
Okay.
Okay, now can real quick.
Yeah.
Like this came out 5 days ago in the USA Today. And I don't know how much you guys are aware of this, but
Okay.
it was a op-ed that was written by a surviving member of a surviving family member of the Twin Towers.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm not
as in like their family member died in the towers.
Yeah, they had a family member die. So this isn't quotes from them or anything. I just took it from the article. So it said that the 9/11 terrorists, there were 19 of them, and they hailed from 4 countries. 2 were from United Arab Emirates. 1 was from Lebanon. 1 was from Egypt, and 15 were from Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
Not 1 from Afghanistan.
Right.
But we went to war with them over it, And
yes,
even though the FBI and CIA agree that Al-Qaeda had infiltrated and exploited the Saudi government prior to 9/11, Saudi Arabia assisted these terrorists in obtaining accommodations, transportation, opening and funding bank accounts, acquiring identification, blending into the community, and enrolling in flight lessons. Okay? Saudi Arabia did that. No Afghanistan, no Iraq. The FBI and Justice Department have admitted in federal court that they are in possession of highly relevant documents on the role Saudi officials played in aiding the terrorists. William Barr ordered these locked away under state secret privilege, and thus far the Biden administration has made no attempt at reversing that decision. So this op-ed is this person that is begging. I read the whole thing, man. It was a tearjerker, dude. It's just like, we voted for Joe Biden because he promised transparency and promised that he would treat every country the same, regardless. He wasn't going to play favorites with Saudi Arabia. Do you remember that in the beginning? Like he, if it came to light that Prince Salman or whatever ordered Jamal Khashoggi to be killed, that he was going to do something about it. That was when he was on the campaign trail. Mm-hmm. And then immediately, like after he's put into office, the story comes out that Salman did know about it. He gave the order. And Joe Biden said, we're not going to treat them like a pariah. Right. That's all he said on it. So here we have all this information that links Saudi Arabia, 15 of the 19 terrorists, links them to the 9/11 bombings, and nothing, okay. So we went after, So we went after Bin Laden because he fled to Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. All right, I can understand that.
So it sounds like there's a whole bunch of information on this particular issue, but we've been talking about, the way we treat Saudi Arabia differently from Afghanistan for quite a bit of this episode. And I think it's become quite apparent that it's become quite apparent that the United States government will treat its allies and its what's the word I want to use to describe Israel and Saudi Arabia? Its tools, if you will. It will definitely treat them differently than its enemies for the same crime or the same acts. No question.
It's the same way liberals will ignore like Como stuff and just be like, but Trump. It's like, well, you still have two shitty people, right?
And one of the grossest parts about the whole thing is we have a culture of warmongering. The propaganda of it all has been so successful that you see a guy in military uniform at a restaurant and you'll watch 10 or 15 people walk up and shake his hand and say, thank you for your service. Having no knowledge of who this guy is, what he did, where he's stationed, what his rank is, what his job was, nothing. You just see a soldier, and it's more on the conservative side. You see a soldier, they'll walk up, thank you for your service. I was in Vietnam, and you think about how close of a story this is to Vietnam and how people love to say we haven't learned our lesson. Yes, we have. It's the same thing. We were never there for moral, superiority or for, governmental superiority in Vietnam either. We were over there looking for the same kinds of shit we were looking for in Afghanistan, something to use and something to gain. And we used our military to do it. When you have a problem and you're a hammer, you got to make it look like a nail. That's what we've been talking about this whole show.
Yeah. And they're incredibly good at it too. Like the only problem is now is we have so many ways to communicate with people, right?
Yeah. And the culture is what I want to talk about for just a second, because we were talking earlier about the bad faith arguments and the propaganda, but that's all part of this culture, because we have this culture that like America has to be at war. I was in a thread with a janky liberal last night who was arguing that our government has to have bombs and planes and weapons. So who else to buy them from if not Raytheon and Lockheed Martin? I'm like, hold on. Does it have to have bombs and planes and weapons, or are you convinced that it does?
Yeah,
does it actually have to?
It seems like people
why do we have so much?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why do we need so much? Yeah, why do we have an overstock? Why do we have hangars and bunkers just full of storage? Why have we lost nuclear weapons? We have nuclear weapons where we just don't know where they are. That is a truth.
Look at all these Taliban taking pictures of all the weapons that they just have of arms that the Afghan soldiers just abandoned. Yeah.
I mean, it would
driving around in our Humvees and shit.
It would take an absurdly naive mind to think that there's no coincidence between prominent members of Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and Halliburton being major political, major political figures and cabinet position members and, administrators in the members of the administrations that have come and gone, like Dick Cheney or Joe Biden. And the fact that major weapons contractors like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Halliburton make massive anonymous political donations to party candidates on every side. I mean, is it a coincidence that Dick Cheney became one of the richest men in the world after we started going into the Middle East because Halliburton stock quintupled overnight, basically?
Didn't they also get the contracts to do the cleanup work?
Yes, they did.
It was a no bid $50 billion contract.
Yeah.
I remember reading about it back then, and I was like, that was before $1 billion was thrown around like it was $1 million.
They got, they got both sides of the thing. They got the agreement to sell the tools to destroy it, and then they got the agreement to rebuild it with their own tools.
And the pipeline.
Yes. And then you look at even back in January, February timeframe when the Biden administration approved a $600 billion weapons sale, and the guy who was in charge of the sale was still at the damn company.
Yeah. Yeah,
that was Raytheon, I believe.
Much?
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's our current Secretary of Defense, right?
I believe something to that effect. Yeah.
Lloyd Austin, right?
Yeah, something to that effect.
It's Raytheon, Boeing, and what's the other plane?
Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, that one. Right.
Hey, but real quick, whenever I zoned out just a minute ago, I was looking for the shit that I had wrote down.
Yeah.
But I didn't write it down. I forgot that I screenshot it. Okay.
Right.
So real quick, this was in the Denver Post several years back, and it said, I didn't do the whole thing, but it's talking about the ties. It's talking about the ties to bin Laden and Bush, the Bush family. Okay.
Yep.
The bin Laden family. A lot of people just remember bin Laden in his caves and shit and just think that he was some poor dude or whatever, but he came from one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia. And so it says, but the more we learn about the ties between the Bush family and the bin Ladens, questions like this pop up. Did Bush really want to capture him? With fewer than 50 ground troops surrounding the massive Tora Bora region in the mountains of Afghanistan where bin Laden was hiding, ground commanders pleaded for 800 more soldiers, according to Gary Bernstein, the CIA field commander, whose book Jawbreaker goes into amazing detail about it. He says that, okay, so was that because President George Bush's close ties to the bin Laden family? In 1978, George H.W. Bush and Osama bin Laden's brother, Salim bin Laden, founded Arbusto Energy, an oil company based in Texas. Several bin Laden family members invested millions in the Carlyle Group, a private global equity firm based in Washington, D.C. The company's senior advisor was Bush's father. And after news of the bin Laden Bush connection became public, the elder Bush stepped down from Carlyle. Now, I'm sure you guys remember this, but maybe some of our listeners don't, that on September 11th, 2001, members of the Carlyle Group, including Bush Sr., his former Secretary of State James Baker, were meeting at the Ritz-Carlton in Washington, D.C., along with Shafiq bin Laden, another one of Osama bin Laden's brothers. While all flights were halted following the terrorist attack, there was one exception made. The White House authorized planes to pick up 140 Saudi nationals, including 24 members of the bin Laden family living in various cities in the U.S., to bring them back to Saudi Arabia, where they would be safe. They were never interrogated.
I do remember that, yes.
Do you mind if I actually take that a step further?
Please do.
Because while you were talking, I went up to dig up a source on this, and I've actually got two things that I want to get into, but I'll go with this one first because it's more directly topical. So if you think Biden, yeah, that's what I meant to say. If you think the bin Laden ties are bad, if I could tell you right now that the Bush family was also tied to Hitler, would you believe me?
I wouldn't be surprised.
So
Prescott Bush.
Yes, that's right. Check this out. So doing business with the enemy is nothing new to the Bush family. Much of the Bush family wealth came from supplying needed raw materials and credit to Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. Several business operations managed by Prescott Bush, the president's grandfather, were seized by the U.S. government during World War II under the Trading with the Enemy Act. On October 20th, 1942, the federal government seized the Union Banking Corporation in New York City as a front operation for the Nazis. Prescott Bush was a director. Bush, E. Roland Harriman, 2 Bush associates, and 3 Nazi executives owned the bank's shares. 8 days later, the Roosevelt administration seized 2 other corporations managed by Prescott Bush. The Holland American Trading Corporation and the Seamless Steel Equipment Corporation, both managed by the Bush-Harriman Bank, were accused by the U.S. federal government of being front organizations for Hitler's Third Reich. Again, on November 8, 1942, the federal government seized Nazi-controlled aspects of Silesia, an American corporation, another Bush-Harriman company doing business with Hitler.
Didn't Ford make a bunch of money off the Nazis as well?
I mean, everybody who was alive in business made money off it. Bayer, like aspirin, made money off the damn Nazis.
But this all, correlates with what you said at the beginning about paperclip.
Yeah.
That right? Am I wrong about the paper Operation
No,
Paperclip?
Operation Paperclip was
the
they brought all the Nazi scientists in and basically gave them pardons in exchange for helping them win the arms race against the Soviets.
how we started
Yeah.
NASA.
Yeah. It did directly start NASA. So yeah, I mean, that was, and the reason I brought that up at the beginning was about bad faith, but you can see right here that that prominent members of our government and relatives of government officials will work with fuck anybody to achieve any fuck profitable means that exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up, was Edward Snowden is very timely, and no more so than right now, because while we've been taping this episode, he sent out this great tweet on October 11th, 2001, a few days after the United States started bombing the Taliban. A reporter asked Bush, "Can you avoid being drawn into a Vietnam-like quagmire in Afghanistan?" Altogether now, quagmire, Rumsfeld joked at the news conference on November 27th, 2001. So I know that you guys wanted to talk to a little bit about this Vietnam comparison. And that's kind of why I brought it up a moment ago, because I know that you guys had some relevant quotes and information about this Vietnam comparison.
Well, I think Yeti's got the timeline from like the moment Biden announced the withdrawal, and I think he's got a. Yeah, just go ahead and start from there, and I think he's got the Vietnam quote in there.
Yeah, I don't have the exact quote. I kind of wrote it down as a synopsis of it, if you will. So on April 14th was when Biden announced the withdrawal starting May 1st, and then it would end on September 11th.
And
just to predicate
this was also something that was discussed under Trump's administration too, but I believe he had an earlier exit deadline of May.
Yeah, it was May 1st, and then Biden renegotiated with the Taliban for a September 11th draw.
And supposedly that's why we are where we are today. That's why we've got the bad optics. That's why you've got a picture today of 600 Afghan refugees on a plane that's meant to hold like 450 people max,
hanging off the bottom, falling to their death.
Not just that. I'm talking about the picture today where we actually let those people on board the plane. You know? And all people can say is, where are they going? You know, what are we gonna?
Three people died falling off that plane.
Yeah, that was terrible.
And then there was two shot. And
that will forever be, you know, cemented in his legacy is us taking off while all these people that we were supposed to be protecting all this time, right? You know, we were supposed to, well, we're staying there for 20 years because of the Afghan people. We can't let them get taken back over by the Taliban. And then you've got an image of this huge ass cargo plane going down the runway with people chasing after it. Like, where are you going? What? Let us go with you. We're going to die. And people knew, or, you know, they would have rather clung to the wheel of that plane and just seen what the hell happened rather than experience whatever was going to happen on the other end.
Yeah. So
that's sad shit, man.
To just circle back a little bit, can you give me that Vietnam quote?
Oh, well, it was just Biden that on July the 6th, you know, one of the people in the media, you know, just gave him one of his normal softball questions that he should have been able to just knock out of the park, and you know, asked him if this was going to be in anywhere comparable to our exit from Vietnam, and Biden said, in no way will this be a Saigon moment. You will not see any helicopters taking away American citizens off the roof of the embassy in Kabul.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
that actually happened? Leads into something for me. So
yeah, go ahead.
We're going back to that timeline. So May 4th, the Taliban launched their big offensive in the southern Helmand province, as well as 6 other provinces. And then you go to May 11th, they've captured the Nurik district outside of Kabul. You go up to June 7th now. 150 Afghan soldiers are killed within 24 hours. 26 of 34 provinces have now fighting in them. The 22nd, the Taliban launches multiple attacks in the north. North is not a traditional area for the Taliban to hold. So that's about when they first go into starting to extend their territory.
Well, and go back to when it first started.
So May 4th.
May 4th, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. What was Trump's departure date? What was their agreement?
It was May 1st was the original date.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
So if Biden would have just honored that, see what I mean? So that's how this all transpired. It's like Biden's like, nope, I'm not Trump, so we're going to do it on September the 11th because that's a 20-year anniversary and I'm going to get my photo op.
Yeah.
Right?
He's more worried about not trumping something than actually giving a shit about people.
And
so what did the Taliban do? They waited 3 days and they were just like, you know what? Forget it, man. We had an agreement. You guys backed out and now we're coming for you.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep saying that this isn't, Biden deserves no credit. You know what I mean? He had to get out of there. These people were coming.
Yeah.
And it was all because of our deceptiveness.
Yeah. And they moved quick. So like you go from May 4th to what's the 17th today of August. So within May, June, July, 2 and a bit months, they just basically retook the whole country.
Well, and they had surrounded the big cities, right?
Yeah. So
so they had taken over all these little provinces and they had surrounded the big cities, but they hadn't made a move. It was still like whatever was going on behind the scenes. It was kind of like the Taliban is like talking to whoever, you know, whatever general but some kind of communication was going on where the Taliban had had taken over all them cities and they were sitting on the outskirts like, look, you're going to move out by this date or whatever, or we're coming in because
pretty much.
Because what happened? It took 9 days for them to take over the major cities.
Yeah, because they surrounded Kabul, and then July 2nd is when the U.S. emptied Bagram Air Base, which is their biggest air base in Afghanistan. July 5th, the Taliban said they could have a written peace proposal to the Afghan government by August. And then after that, on the 21st, they took control of half the districts in Afghanistan. July 25th, the U.S. vows to keep backing the Afghan army in the coming weeks with air support. And then on the 26th of July, UN estimates that 2,400 civilians have been killed in May and June fighting. And then you jump to August, and August 6th, provincial capital to fall, which is Zaranjay, I think it's called. I apologize for mispronouncing that for everyone.
We're not experts.
And then on the 13th of August, they grabbed 4 more capitals, including the big one of Kandahar. The August 14th takes major northern cities of Mazar-i-Sharif and Pul Alam. And then on the 15th, they take Jalalabad. And then also on the 15th, they start entering Kabul. And then the U.S. starts evacuating embassies.
So this is exactly, I mean, almost like exactly like if you study up on the fall of us in Vietnam. You know, like my dad was in the Vietnam War, and he's sitting there watching this transpire. And before that helicopter even lands, before, you know, like he told me, he said this is the exact same thing. He said, this is, I mean, it's like every major city falls, and then we're holed up in this last the biggest city that there is, and you know, shit's getting ready to hit the fan. And
Yeah.
And so I mean, it's exactly like, it's almost like the Taliban took the Viet Cong's playbook. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just crazy that like 75, an estimated 75,000 soldiers, Taliban soldiers, did this.
Yeah. Like, it's amazing. It's like the 300 Spartan thing from history. Didn't end so well for them eventually, but the idea is such a small group can push back against such a seemingly impossible odds.
Well, and you know, whenever you mentioned at the beginning about the mineral reserves, nobody knew about that. Like, we can look back at our invasion of Afghanistan, and you know, like, it came to light in 2010 that they had all these mineral reserves that nobody knew about. And somebody said that Afghanistan had so much lithium, which makes our computers or cell phone batteries, stuff like that, that they had so much lithium that they could end up being the Saudi Arabia of lithium, the way Saudi Arabia is to oil.
The oil?
And
that's awesome.
And so, like, when I posted that article from 2010, where New York Times talks about it, you know, they also talk about there being huge veins of iron, copper, cobalt, gold, but mainly the lithium, you know. And so that was in 2010, and it was almost like it was in correlation with when Assange released the Afghan war documents. You know, kind of like, this has been a huge clusterfuck, but it's going to end up paying off. We're going to get some of this lion's share of the lithium, and then Afghan is going to end up prospering because of it. And then nothing was said again until like 2017, whenever Trump wanted to withdraw our troops. And then somebody probably turned him on to that article. And because in 2017, there was an article that said Trump is eyeing the $1 trillion worth of mineral reserves to pay for reconstruction, to help pay us back for some of the money we've wasted in Afghanistan. Like those people, you know, like, they're on the hook. You know, we invaded your country, we blew it all to hell.
Now you pay us for this waste of time.
Yeah, and now pay us. That's the way we've done Syria. You know what I mean? Right. And Iraq. But I dove a little bit further into the mineral reserves, okay? Because I wanted to know, like, who got rich off this shit. And it turns out that really nobody has. The lithium ended up being in a Taliban controlled area, the huge deposits of it. And their mining industry is like nothing. They've got a couple mining contracts with China for copper mines, but they were supposed to have gotten like $1 billion from it, and they've only, up till this point, only gotten like 18 million back. And there's no roads, and there's no infrastructure in place for a successful mining opportunity. Like all that stuff is there in the ground, but nobody has any way of getting it out.
Right.
And so it, I don't know like what they plan on doing with it, but to me,
I know
to me
China.
well, I'm just saying, to me, with those numbers that you brought up, Swerve, about
Yeah.
how it seems like everybody seems to be okay with everything going to Sharia law or whatever, which is on them. It's their country, it's their way of life. So if they can manage to find a way to mingle with the Taliban, and the Taliban ends up honoring their word, like they said, and you know, being more respectful of women and whatnot. If that ends up happening, man, and like they end up making some kind of deal to where they can start mining that lithium that they've been guarding for all these years,
Mm-hmm.
and then they end up becoming a success story. That's like, to me, that's the best case scenario out of all this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We wasted at least $2 trillion is what they say.
Yeah.
You know, and once you get up to that kind of amount of money, who even fucking knows? So they wasted that much taxpayer money, but then they'll sit here, the Republicans and Democrats, and fucking argue about a couple $1 trillion infrastructure deal. You know, like, oh, we don't want to spend 2 trillion, let's just spend 1 trillion. And that's for us, man. That's
Yeah.
to build fucking roads and bridges and put people to work. And they have no problem just throwing away all this money on this war and have not one goddamn thing to show for it at the end of the day, except this bad fucking photo op. And I mean, seeing all these fucking militants with all of our weapons and all of our vehicles, and you know what I mean? It's
I
like,
know.
Is
it's
this
like,
America's
I hope
greatest
to
loss?
God is what?
Is this America's greatest loss in
It
war?
very well might be. It might go down that way for sure.
Like,
Oh, it
it's
has to
pretty
be.
fucking bad.
It has to
Especially if
be.
you're like me and you don't think it's genuinely over, and there's still going to be money unfolding in this whole thing. Then,
Well,
then it's definitely.
Well, the Pentagon
and
loses
Swerve,
money
you're
all the
right.
fucking time.
Swerve, you're right that it won't be over. Like, as far, see, I just think that they're done in Afghanistan. I think the Taliban has you know, called our bluff and shown our hand. And I think like, you know, we're going to have bases set up all around, surrounding it, the same way we do China, the same way we do Iran. We're just not welcome in their country anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see it as, I just personally can't see it as being over. I think eventually something stupid will happen that'll either be genuine or a fake, and then we'll find ourselves in a scenario where, well, we can't let this go unanswered, and military retaliation has to be swift. I mean, Biden himself was even saying that, you know, if you mess with our embassy people, then the American retaliation will be swift, as recently as like a day or two ago.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I just cannot, knowing what I know about America and the fact that basically since the turn of the 21st century, we've been at war. I just can't see it being over. And maybe I'm just jaded and I'm being naive, and maybe it, you know, we'll be done with this for 10 or 15 years and we'll all feel like it's over. I don't know. I'm not pretending to be an expert, but what I do know is just that, as we've been saying for weeks on this show, if I'm going to end up fucking trusting the government, that'll be the last fucking thing I ever do. So, and with that being said, guys, we are pushing time here. So we unfortunately do have to wrap up, although I would not be surprised if we ended up doing an Afghanistan part 2 episode at some point in the near future. it just seems like it's probably going to be in the cards. So I want to thank both of you gentlemen for a wonderful episode here. We hope everybody out there enjoys it. If you have more information or conflicting information or challenging information that you want to give to us, you can DM the podcast on Twitter at DifficultPod, or you can email it to us at elitecitymedia@gmail.com. That email is our official email that I do all our business through, so you can send us that information there as well. Guys, I feel for those people. Like, let's just wrap up with this basic fact. Like, I definitely feel for those people, those citizens over there, because, you know, you're getting mixed reports that some people are fine and some people say it's not that bad, and then others, you know, there's planes chasing people, and you've seen the videos of people fleeing on airplanes. And I did do my own thing that I talked about a few weeks ago. I did go on the Snap Map and take a look at the stories people are posting in Kabul, and you know, it's a little conflicting, so it's hard to know exactly the common consensus over there. But anybody who would be negatively affected by any of this obviously would have our support and our sympathies. But I'm not going to say that that you're in my thoughts and prayers. I'm not going to say that, because I actually respect you too much to say some shit like that. So once again,
I just want to say something nice, and I'm like, I don't want to say thoughts and prayers, but I'm like,
yeah, what do you say, right?
Good luck.
Yeah. Good luck, assholes. We do want to remind everybody that we are officially on Podbean and Spotify, as well as YouTube, and within the coming weeks, keep your eyes on Pandora, iHeartRadio, and Apple as well. If you like this episode, please share it around with your friends, family, whoever else might get a reaction from it. Download it at one of those websites officially. Be on the lookout for live streams coming in the near future. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, I am Swerve. On behalf of Yeti and Spittin', we want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on Difficult Realities. Take care, everybody.